in what you have to say. We've gotten a lot of publicity here from Peter leading up to this. So everybody is excited about your presentation, what you'll be discussing. We have Jim Kelleher of Kelleher. I'll get it here as well. So we're going to be speaking about healthcare and our expectations for 2023. So why don't you both just take a minute, introduce yourselves, and then we'll dive into the content and have a great conversation for the next 45 minutes. Jim, why don't you take it away?
All right, thanks very much. So look, it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. So I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my experience with you. I hope it's helpful. I'm a psychiatrist and I'm an investment banker. I work for Young America Capital and also for New York Bay Capital. They're associated firms. New York Bay's focus is more cross-border investing. And we raise capital for companies in the healthcare space. And our focus runs gamut, really, from diagnostics to therapeutics to services. It's in that context I'm here today. I also practice psychiatry, and I'm a passionate clinician and researcher. Years ago, I had a research, I won a couple of awards for my research, which were demonstrated a new mechanism of action for an antipsychotic drug. And that mechanism of action is used in the blockbuster drug Vraylar now. So it took about 20 years to tell that story. But my career took a few twists and turns, and I went to Columbia Business School, just trying to build on experience and meet the healthcare moment where it is. And so now I also help advance science in this way as well. I've been on the Yale Venture Advisory Board, the Yale University of Connecticut's Innovative Therapeutics Programs and Advisory Board and things like that. So I'm happy to call on my experience and answer your questions.
So Bader, why don't you take a minute here? It's Bader, right?
Yeah, yes, it is. Absolutely. So a little background about myself. I'm an MD by training. And in a previous life, I also worked in healthcare venture capital and strategy consulting. Then I went to Yale, actually, just similar to Jim, to do a master's in healthcare management. And from my dorm, so to speak, we launched Profima.com, which is a clinical research firm that helps predict outcomes of clinical trials. So what we do is we help our partners in the pharma and medtech space kind of develop predictive analytics on the next phase of their clinical trials. So I'll keep my introduction a little brief.
Well, I'm going to have to probe just a little bit. When you have predictive around clinical trials, are you phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, all 3 phases? Where do you play in this?
So we do mostly phase 0 and phase 1.
Mostly phase 0 and phase 1. Okay. So when you were bringing your product to market 20 years ago, you started this process. Talk to us a little bit about the road you traveled and what it was like going through the phases, getting approval, and then getting out to market and creating a market for it, and in the long run making some money on the back end of all that.
Well, I'd love to say I was part of every part of that, and I wasn't. I had the initial demonstration of that, and so I got awards from the National Institute of Mental Health and the International Congress on Schizophrenia Research. And I continued to practice, and I continued to do research. I also had a family obligation, so I focused on that. Meanwhile, the research took off on its own. But I did subsequently engage with a team in order to develop a compound based on those same strategies. So I got some experience of what it's like trying to raise capital for an early stage venture of that kind. And it's a very worthy endeavor, but it's not a simple matter. And then subsequently, of course, all was revealed when the research that I was responsible for the research. It's part of what Vraylar does, and Vraylar was from a large pharma company that then came to market. But that helped me understand what it takes to raise capital for a lot of the companies I work with now, whether they're in the pharma space or maybe devices or something else, especially that needs regulation. I think you need to understand the structure of how to bring the compound or the therapeutic agent or the diagnostic to our device to market, what's involved in that, and who may be interested in investing at different stages. I'm sure Bader's had his own experience with some of that too.
Oh, I'll get the Bader in just a second. I just want to follow on with you here for another second, because it's not just the US, right? So you obviously can think of multi-country when you're introducing a new drug or new compound or a new device. You said you're with a firm that specializes in cross-border. I don't know if that's your particular expertise or not, but sort of talk about, how companies are thinking about where to bring it to market first.
Well, I think that's a really strategic and important question. I mean, one of the things about this is that the United States really is, in some ways, a cradle of innovation. It's structured that way. Our drug costs are much higher than the rest of the world on average, and I think that we're paying for the opportunity to be a driver in the innovation space. And so when it comes to getting a drug approved, the United States market also is particularly appealing to investors because it's a good return. And at the same time, there may be some opportunities to get introduced to other marketplaces because they're smaller, earlier, or in different ways. So you need to know your way around the regulatory environment and what will be very important. You need to know the science cold and what's also what's current, because different things become very important at different points in time. They become a focus, and all of a sudden, you really need to account for this or that and satisfy the objectives. And of course, if you've been able to see the process through the teamwork that's involved in this, the enormous teamwork that's involved in it across the board, hopefully at that point, you're going to have enough expertise or bring in more expertise to help you get past that final hurdle.
Peter, we just heard Jim go through the litany here of what it takes to get something to market, how expensive it can be, and particularly in the early phases, I think it's important to identify the ones that are going to be successful and unsuccessful, which is seems to be your bailiwick, or at least you have great insights in that area. Talk to me a little bit about who are you selling to? I think of the entrepreneur as not being someone who has a lot of cash and money. Maybe they're services. Maybe it's the university paying for it. Maybe it's a drug company paying for it. So I'm very curious. Talk to me about who is buying your services for phase 0 and phase 1.
Absolutely. So most of the clients that we work with are early stage med tech companies who have developed some kind of medical assistive technology that they would like to know would get through the regulators or not. So we're able to kind of run simulations on, let's call them digital twins, and kind of identify what this may look like, and basically give another data point to the client to kind of understand, is this the pony that we're going to bet on?
So it's actually the company you're saying is the one that's making the payment to you.
Yes. We work directly with the company that's developing the product.
And then they use that to go out to the prospective investors and say, hey, here's our simulations. This shows you we've got a good chance of getting it through. Is it through phase 1 through 3, or is it just through phase 1 and 2? How far do you take them?
So we only work in the early phases. So we work with early stage companies. The more mature companies, I think, are less likely to want to share that data. They silo it a lot more, which is part of the reason why it's so expensive to develop some of these pharmaceuticals. Hopefully in a world sometime in the future, we may see more data sharing that can help us use some of the machine learning and AI to kind of look at best strategies to develop these drugs.
And talk a little bit about the factors, without giving away your secret sauce here. Talk about the factors that you look at that help you figure out whether or not it's going to be successful and the regulators are going to like it or dislike it.
Well, the primary thing that we can compare or benchmark this study on would be based on similar studies that we find in the US or overseas, and we try to compare that that client's product, using our software to see what the outcome may look like.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's really based on comparables to a certain extent, other drugs in a similar position, things of that nature. Very good.
I mean,
Let's take a step.
to grow this, to grow our database, what we would like to do is to continue to develop more partnerships with pharma companies who would be willing to share their data. So, kind of develop a network of pharmaceutical companies who are all data sharing. So that makes it a lot more predictive and a lot more accurate if we know that, company X has already run this simulation and there's an overlap between what we're trying to do and that didn't work. So that helps a lot. And, maybe sometime in the future, we can figure out a revenue model that could be successful for everyone involved.
Terrific. Let's take a step back and go a little more macro here. So between the two of you, let's talk about, strategies. Let's talk about geographies and also sectors within the healthcare space that you think are going to be bullish in 2023, that you're bullish on in 2023, and maybe some that you're bearish on in 2023.
Well, I think that we've talked a little bit about developing compounds, for example, for the marketplace. It's a vitally important thing that will drive a lot of change in healthcare, positive change, and it will provide a lot of profit for investors. But the opportunities across the board in the near term would include such things as telehealth and AI, things that don't require such regulation, for example, and approval. Some of these things will be regionally adopted in a more advanced way in certain parts of the country and certain parts of the world. There are concepts that are being proven. That's a pharma development sort of idea, but around the world and using AI and telehealth, which we're going to see advancing more in 2023 here in the United States, and they'll provide real return to investors, I think.
Peter, do you have any thoughts? What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
So I'm going to have to disagree with Jim a little bit.
That's the fun of a panel discussion.
I'm not necessarily bearish on telemedicine. I think telemedicine is an incredible advent in the healthcare space, and it's definitely changed the world, the way that we communicate with physicians. However, that being said, I do believe that there is a decline in quality of care through telemedicine, and you're starting to see other countries regulate the telespace in a way that could be bearish. There's a legislation recently that passed in Canada that said that that you can no longer bill for telemedicine codes. You have to have an X number of visits with the patient before you can start seeing them through a teleservice. And I think these are positive things because telespace, I think, does pose certain clinical treatment risks, and there could be a decline in outcomes because of that. Now, what am I bullish on? I'm definitely bullish on AI and predictive analytics when it comes to clinical trials. I think there's gonna be a kind of a new wave that you're gonna see in the next few months, few years, of a lot of similar companies popping up, trying to compete for market share. We've already got to notice them come out woodwork. So
I see a hand up over here.
Well, taking that analogy forward, come the day if AI really gets intelligent, that you won't have to do clinical trials at all. You just present the molecule, computer does the work, and it's either approved or not approved.
That'd be great.
Well,
Save a lot of money.
well, that's a long way off.
No, I know.
I think the issue is exogenous factors.
I was going to actually ask Peter a different question,
No,
but related to what you brought
Those
up
are-
here.
those are analyzed by AI.
technology.
So my question is, are you concerned at all? Maybe you're a little too far out in front of the market. I mean, when I think about medicine particularly, and we're not talking about doctors' offices here, we're talking about research groups and we're talking about drug company development. But the lack of information that is generally and easily accessible, particularly with anything in their pipelines, the pipelines today are more like acquisitions that they're buying from startup companies. But so how are you, how are you getting the information you need to have about all these different areas and these different drugs to know whether or not it's going to make it through there? I don't, are you having difficulties getting enough information? Are there times you say to a company, we just don't have enough data here to do it for you?
Okay. So we work with the data that we can find. So that's number one. Number two, we do is partnerships with people who volunteer their data, And number three, I can't tell you what number three is.
Number three, you have to pay.
You just sign up to get a whole lot of business plans. And I like to pretend that I learned much more from forward-looking business plans than I ever learned at medical school. So the cutting edge of medicine is being presented by early stage companies. And their business plans are often very discursive. And one can glean, if one doesn't sign an NDA or CDA, one can still glean a hell of a lot from their presentations and their decks and their exhibits. So being in the venture world, be profligate about receiving propositions, and you'll learn a lot.
And I think that's very true. I mean, you see more and more technology coming out in beta space through the AI, where they can actually just take the whole document, read through it, pull out the important information that it needs in order to make predictive analytics that have been programmed into it. And I think that is a very likely way that this will evolve. But Bader, you have further thoughts? You're in this space.
Up a really great point. And just kind of recently, if we just get the wave that ChatGPT is making in the world, it's making us live in a very much more productive world. It kind of feels like the early days of Google. If maybe you're too young, Jim, but in the early days of Google,
Fewer people say that all the time. Thank you.
I remember my first Google search, and ChatGPT feels very much like that.
So, go on.
I was just going to say, Bader, given the field that you're in as well, I wonder about the impact of genetics, broadly speaking, for both of us, because that's a huge driver of progress in medicine today, in many ways. And for example, probably looking at who might be a good candidate to respond to a particular treatment. This at some point 20 years ago was big news almost, and now it's become so commonplace that might be a way to get a predictive response, and well beyond that, But I think that's something we should identify as something that's really driving change right now in the field, and something that would be worthy of further scrutiny moving forward for investors.
Well, I have a slightly different view. The area of pharmacogenomics has been put out there of a lot of contenders, and really the kinds of practical results coming out of it have been small.
Yes.
Just to illustrate, there are something like 23 or 24,000 genes in the human genome. There are many hundreds of thousands different proteins. So that tells you that the post-translational environment and the epigenetic environment is far more complex. So the genes will print out something, but then those somethings interact with each other tremendously. So it's sometimes very difficult to know what assembly of genes you have to put together in order to orchestrate, a complex aftermath. And so that all of these companies that have come up with CRISPR and gene editing, so far, very little is innovated. And because the results of all of these proteins they continue to work in the aftermath of being produced and interact with each other, create different environments. And they all react to the environment itself, whether these be infections or toxins or even physical environments, radiation, weather, temperature, and everything else can change entirely a different pathway. That you would run through. So it's a lot more complicated than it was hoped.
Undoubtedly true, and I wouldn't dispute that one bit. But it does afford the promise of treatments for illnesses that we have not been
Correct.
able to really approach adequately before. And it's
Especially
only
with single gene defects.
absolutely, and so one could hope it's only a matter of time, and we hope it's a shorter horizon for some substantial progress to be made in certain focus areas. But yes, absolutely, it would be easy to overstate the progress that's going to happen in the short run with any particular project.
1 second, you want to chime in with your question and we'll go to you?
Yes, sorry if you mentioned it before, but what about the medical devices? I think it's a very good sector, and some of them also require a lot of AI or data collection that can easily go through. Google doesn't need approval from the FDA and go much faster. Let's say delivery of drugs, let's say, analysis of biopsies. What about that?
So she was asking, Bader, just so you know the question, she was asking about devices in particular and diagnostics and the use of AI to help get them to market faster and to develop successful ones that can move faster. Any thoughts on AI in that area?
Yeah, I think when it comes to devices, that is specifically where AI will shine in the current time, because there's just more data to compare it with. When it comes to drugs, a lot of the data is. I'm sorry, you guys are frozen. I can't tell if you can see me.
We can see you. You're moving here. We're just frozen on your screen.
Okay, great. But when it comes to drug development, that's when it gets a little more tricky. People, pharma companies are more conservative in sharing their data.
Great. Over here.
So the science around aging has been quite active recently. I'm curious as to your take on the developments there, particularly from an investment standpoint. Any thoughts?
Well, there are many ways to approach the challenge of aging. It's clear that people are living longer because of the many advances in medicine. So almost everything we're going to discuss will fall under that umbrella.
Let me ask more narrowly then.
Yeah.
So the term health span is talked about, and so it's not just about extending life, but extending the healthy kind of life, which is something going on at the molecular level and below.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to think about where the business opportunities could be around that. But rather than me talk, I'd love to just.
I wonder if the best answer to that question in terms of specificity might be for services for people who are getting older, because a lot of the things that we are going to see that will enhance the lifespan will be things that are relevant to people at middle age and up. And we just need to employ them maybe more or advance them further. But I think there are huge upsides to the future for healthcare services for older folks, and hopefully I'll live long enough to benefit from it.
Just to chime in a little bit, if you don't mind, before you do, John. Are you familiar with Singularity University?
Yeah.
They actually are saying right now that they believe death is a genetic defect. And they believe that your reaction is mine to that, by the way. But nonetheless, they are posturing that through the manipulation of genes, we can make people live forever. You might want to look at that. That might answer some of your.
Do you want to live forever?
Well, that's another question, But then their whole thing is not only live for a very long period, maybe 400 or 500 years, but that you'll be feeling like you're 20 for 390 of those 400 years.
So the objective really in terms of what was said, health span, is an ephemeral thing. Right? So what most companies are doing in the aging environment, whether they're approaching it from a genetic point of view, or they're approaching it from an immunological point of view, which is my major preference, is that they aim at the stigmata of aging. So they will look at the diseases accompanying aging, or the frailties, even more so, accompanying aging, and aim at rectifying or ameliorating those as part of their objective. Because if you're going to go to the agencies and say, you know, I'd like to get a drug for health span, you know, your clinical trials are going to be unbelievably massive, because your criteria would have to be decided upon, and that's very difficult. Likewise, lifespan. I mean, there's going to be no clinical trial on lifespan. It's impossible to even contemplate, you know, how to do it and get statistical results. So you'd have to die before the results came out.
I will say that there's some advances with mental health.
So yeah, so the
people
whole
get older.
the arena of aging now becomes the bailiwick of gerontological immunology, which is highly important, because immunology controls repair and regeneration. It's not only anti-infection, etc., but the immune system is highly engaged in tissue regeneration and repair, which is cardinal. And genetic mistakes is what I think the singularity approach is that they look at, you know, when cells divide, the DNA divides, and there can be accidents in that division, and then the DNA doesn't function as well in the second generation cells.
You should
so they try and
Look up
rectify
the YouTube on it and watch the programs, because you probably understand it better than I do.
Well,
But I also want to get Rob in here because he's got a very interesting question. So Rob, why don't you chime on in?
Thank you. Peter, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. My question is directed to you, because you're affiliated with Yale University. Are you seeing a consistent amount or a notably different amount of university spin-offs, of IP type healthcare spin-offs than average?
So I don't speak for Yale, but I'll tell you what I observed. I observed that there is definitely a push from the university to have, I think Yale sees itself as a potential leader in this space and has started new initiatives to kind of promote university companies. Why should MIT get all the glory?
Jim, I think you're also involved with Yale. Any additional thoughts to what?
I think Bader's thoughts are mine. I mean, the thing is, we were, there goes my ID. As I mentioned, I've been on the venture advisory board for the Innovative Therapeutics program for Yale and University of Connecticut. And I've been involved with some other universities in that respect. The thing is that I think it's a pivotal moment for universities to continue to grow in this space. And it takes a combination of skills which were previously more separate and maybe not seen as part of the core mission in quite the same way. And it's been going on for some time, but I would say that it's probably going to become more of a focus for companies to be spun off of universities. We're certainly seeing that, the Office of Tech Transfer in different places. And I work a lot with those kinds of companies. I was going to say, in terms of the older folks, we're seeing some real advances in the mental health aspects of getting older, which are very, very exciting. And they do include progress in Alzheimer's disease, which is a major problem affecting older folks typically. So we look forward to more of that. And I think that may be a big factor as we go through the next 10 years.
I want to tie a little bit about what we heard this morning from our economist friend, who spoke so glowingly about the future for the next few months here. He specifically said he anticipates in about 6 months we're going to see a a recession. He was not clear on how long that recession would last. He did suggest that it would be significant. In that atmosphere, what's going to be the impact on healthcare in terms of, the continuation of it, taking these through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, the innovation that you see on the front end that for the past 10 years, that we've had tremendous amounts of people out there developing new drugs, new therapies, new things. What's going to happen and how's that going to be impacted?
Well, it might be easy to speculate that things will slow down in that space, but I'm not so sure that's going to happen, because I think we're going to probably see more advances that will spur more investment in that space in selective areas. I think, though, what might happen is that if we do have a recession, coupled with the post-COVID moment right now, where the healthcare services were stretched quite a bit, we're going to see the need for more manpower in service provision, and there will be some opportunities for automation in that space. There will be some opportunities for manpower in that space. There will be a lot more sort of self-directed healthcare opportunities also, as people can use their own tech applications to advance their healthcare. And that's true for insurance industries and so forth as well.
Peter, any thoughts?
I don't know if we're going to be going into a recession or not, but, healthcare as a whole is generally quite a recession resilient industry. So I don't necessarily see spending to decline significantly during a recession. Maybe the contrary could happen. And the pandemic kind of caught us with our pants down. So I don't think that any money will be flowing away from healthcare anytime soon, even if we are in a recession. This is you can argue it's of the greatest national interest to make sure that the U.S. is constantly innovating and advancing in terms of healthcare.
John, you have another.
Look, there has been a recessionary psychology in the funding of healthcare. Over the last year and a half, the amount of money coming into biomedical ventures has really dropped majorly. And it's because of people's caution about public markets, about risk in financial terms in general. Actually, for those who are able to do it, now is the time. Because whether you go into a fund and that fund is taking advantage of price pressures in the market, or you're facing deals directly from a family office or from a person, this is the time to go in, because valuations have dropped. These companies' realizations are going to be in 4 or 5 years' time, when current economics doesn't pertain at all. And so it's just an opportune time to take advantage, because the science hasn't changed. In fact, it's improved. The competition for these deals has dropped. So, the survivors are going to do extremely well. I think this is an excellent time to start in looking at medical venture capital, whether privately or through funds.
Last question.
I was just going to piggyback and make a bit of a comment, a bit of an adjustment to what he said. And then you can respond, or Jim can respond, or Bader can. A lot of money went into this because of COVID, into medical technology. And I won't say it ever became a public, because I don't think it rose to that level. But if you do that, then you can say it popped, and that's why you're seeing the drop off now. But I do think people got over allocating their portfolios to the healthcare space and now want to diversify out, and that's what we've been seeing since that time. And that would be my only tweak to what you said there.
No, but it feeds into what I say. If everyone's overexposed and you're not, now's the time to go in.
Oh, exactly. No, I agree. I'm not disagreeing with that. I was just on the reason for why it's dipping down. I don't think it's a psychology as much as, perhaps financial regular, shall we say.
But at the same time, high tech also took a dive. And that had little to do with COVID.
I don't know. I think particularly telecommunications went up tremendously. Zoom had a lot of winners over there.
I think the one piece that's missing from this conversation is the willingness of payers to cover these new drugs that are coming to market. And that in itself has undermined the investments that are going into it.
That's absolutely true. I mean, if reimbursement a la Europe comes in,
Forget it.
Yeah.
then productivity in the
Then we'll
United
have the
States drops.
healthcare of
I
Europe.
mean, US is the lab of the world. That's why, and we have a free market in drugs more or less. That's why companies ladle their prices into the United States because they have to pay for the stuff they're not getting from governments overseas.
Absolutely.
And so the US consumer is essentially subsidizing the world's consumers of drugs
Absolutely.
in research. Now, if we go that pattern, similar to what control prices around the world,
There
I
won't be any
think
research.
drug productivity will, innovation will
It'll be
drop like a
devastating.
stone.
That's why everyone's going to orphan disease, because you have to cover it.
Well, I want to thank
That can be
our,
ruled as well.